It is over, or at least it has paused. And the difference between those two things, over and paused, is the most important thing you need to understand about what happened last night. 40 days of war, the biggest oil shock in recorded history, two downed American aircraft, thousands of dead civilians, 13 American soldiers killed. The Strait of Hormuz closed for the first time in its history. Gas prices above $4 in America. Petrol approaching levels never seen in the UK. Every deadline extended, every threat escalated, every red line moved, every ceasefire proposal rejected. And then, less than 2 hours before Donald Trump's final deadline expired, the deadline after which he had promised to destroy every bridge and every power plant in Iran, a deal was reached. Trump called it a big day for world peace. Iran declared victory. Pakistan's prime minister said both parties displayed remarkable wisdom. Oil futures fell more than 9% in half an hour. The S&P 500 futures rose more than 1%. The markets that had been pricing in the catastrophe scenario for 40 days reversed course in a single session. And the Strait of Hormuz, the 20-mile-wide waterway through which 1/5 of the world's oil passes, the waterway that this entire series has been about since episode 1, is reopening. This is Geo Polity. This is episode 21, the ceasefire episode, the one that 20 episodes of context made possible to understand in full. Welcome back. If you have been with us from the beginning, you have everything you need to understand what happened last night and why it matters. If you are new here, subscribe and start at episode 1 after you watch this, because the next 2 weeks of negotiations in Islamabad are going to require everything this series has already covered. Let us start with what actually happened, the precise sequence of events, because the details matter enormously. Throughout Tuesday, Trump's threats escalated to levels that shocked even his closest allies. He wrote on Truth Social, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again." He said it in a press conference to reporters. He threatened to destroy every bridge, every power plant, every piece of civilian infrastructure in Iran in a 4-hour window. Behind the scenes, Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir was working through the night, in direct contact simultaneously with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Pakistan had been the back channel for this entire war. On Tuesday night, it was the wire on which everything depended. The breakthrough came through Iran's 10-point proposal. Iran submitted 10 points to the United States via Pakistan. Trump said he has received a 10-point proposal from Iran, which he called a workable basis on which to negotiate. Almost all of the various points of past contention have been agreed to between the United States and Iran, he said, but a 2-week period will allow the agreement to be finalized and consummated. Less than 2 hours before the deadline, Trump announced the ceasefire on Truth Social. This will be a double-sided ceasefire. The reason for doing so is that we have already met and exceeded all military objectives and are very far along with a definitive agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East. Iran's Foreign Minister Araghchi confirmed Tehran's acceptance. For a period of 2 weeks, safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces. The ceasefire is in effect. U.S. offensive military operations have ceased. Iran has agreed to allow shipping coordination through the strait. Peace talks will begin in Islamabad on Friday. Now let us talk about what each side is claiming, and why those claims are contradictory, and why the contradiction matters for the next 2 weeks. Trump's White House said this is a victory for the United States, that President Trump and our incredible military made happen. Trump said the U.S. has met and exceeded all military objectives. He said almost all points of contention have been agreed. Iran's Supreme National Security Council said nearly all the objectives of the war have been achieved. It said, and this is the language you need to hear clearly, good news to the dear nation of Iran. And it added, our hands are on the trigger, and the moment the enemy makes the slightest mistake, it will be met with full force. Both sides claimed victory. Both sides are addressing domestic audiences who need to believe the other side blinked first. Both sides are using language that is designed for internal consumption, rather than diplomatic precision. And both sides are telling the truth, in the way that all parties to an imperfect deal tell the truth about their own reading of what happened. Trump's truth is that Iran agreed to open the Strait of Hormuz. That is the one concrete, verifiable action he has been demanding since the war began. The strait was closed. Now it is opening. He can point to that and say he won. Iran's truth is that it signed nothing about its nuclear program. It surrendered no enriched uranium. It disbanded no proxy forces. It paid no reparations. The core demands of Trump's 15-point plan, the demands Iran called maximalist and unreasonable back in episode 8, are still outstanding. The ceasefire is not a peace treaty. It is a pause in which those questions will be negotiated in Islamabad. That gap between what Trump is calling a victory and what Iran is calling a victory is the space in which the next 2 weeks of negotiations will happen. And that gap is enormous. Now let us talk about the complications, because this ceasefire is not clean. It is not simple. And the complications begin immediately. Netanyahu's office said the ceasefire does not include Lebanon. Pakistan's prime minister said it does include Lebanon. Those are two contradictory statements from two parties to the agreement, made within hours of each other. After the ceasefire came into force at 8 p.m. Eastern, missiles were still launched from Iran toward Israel and several Gulf states. Whether these were last-minute attacks by IRGC commanders who had not yet received or accepted the ceasefire order, or violations of the ceasefire, is unclear. What is clear is that the IRGC, which as we documented in episode 18, has been running this war independently of the civilian government, did not immediately stop shooting when the political announcement was made. Senator Lindsey Graham, who has been Trump's most vocal congressional supporter of the Iran war, said he is extremely cautious regarding what is fact versus fiction in the state of the ceasefire. The Israeli government said it supports Trump's decision, but expressed skepticism that it would hold. Israeli officials believed the apparent breakthrough could unravel and lead to further escalation if the Iranians do not make good on quickly opening the Strait of Hormuz. None of this is catastrophic. Every ceasefire in history has been imperfect in its first hours. The 2025 12-day war ceasefire had violations immediately after it was announced. The Korean War armistice took months to fully implement. The imperfect beginning of a ceasefire is not evidence that the ceasefire has failed. It is evidence that ceasefires are hard. What matters is the trajectory. Are the violations decreasing over the first 24 hours? Is the Hormuz traffic beginning to move? Are the Islamabad talks actually happening on Friday? These are the questions that will determine whether last night was the beginning of the end of this war or the beginning of a new phase of it. Now let us talk about what this means for your daily life. Because after 40 days of this series connecting geopolitics to the personal, the most personal moment of all has arrived. Oil fell more than 9% overnight. West Texas Intermediate crude fell to around $96 a barrel in half an hour after the announcement. Prices remain above pre-war levels. You are not going back to what you paid at the pump in January, but the trajectory has reversed. The direction of travel for your energy costs, your petrol prices, your grocery bills, and your airline ticket prices has changed. The Bank of America had forecast oil above $100 for all of 2026. That forecast is now under review. The EIA, which just yesterday raised its price forecast for 2026 and 2027, will revise those forecasts again. The revision will take weeks to filter through to pump prices and energy bills, but it will happen. The direction is down. Not dramatically, not immediately, but down. For the UK, petrol prices that were heading toward 200 pence per litre will begin their gradual descent. For the US, gas that peaked above $4.30 will begin easing. For the Gulf states that have been absorbing Iranian missile and drone attacks for 40 days, the immediate threat to daily life has reduced. For Lebanon, with its deep uncertainty about whether the ceasefire applies, the situation remains unresolved. For the people of Iran, for the 90 million people who have lived through 40 days of American and Israeli bombs, who have lost thousands of their fellow citizens, who have seen their universities bombed and their hospitals hit and their cities damaged, the ceasefire brings silence where there was sound. That silence is not nothing. Even temporary silence is not nothing when you have been living under bombardment. Now let us connect this moment to all 20 previous episodes of this series. Because the most important thing this channel does is not cover the news, it is connect the dots. In episode 1, we told you the Strait of Hormuz was the most important piece of ocean in the world. Last night, Iran agreed to reopen it. We were right. In episode 2, we told you China was watching and calculating its Taiwan window. Today, China's foreign ministry welcomed the ceasefire. The window China has been measuring against American overstretch begins to close. Not completely. Not immediately, but the equation changes. In episode 3, we told you the tariff crisis and the war were both accumulating domestic political pressure on Trump simultaneously. Last night, Trump got the ceasefire he needed to relieve that pressure before the gas price rebellion consumed his approval ratings completely. In episode 4, we told you about Lebanon. Today, Lebanon's status under the ceasefire is disputed between Israel and Pakistan. The Lebanese front is the most uncertain element of what was agreed last night. In episode 8, we told you about the deal or the apocalypse. Last night, we got neither the clean deal nor the full apocalypse. We got the messy, ambiguous, face-saving pause that we described in episode 16 as actually the most likely outcome. We were right about that too. In episode 18, we told you Iran was not being governed by its president, that the IRGC Military Council was running the war. Today, the IRGC continued firing after the ceasefire was announced. The divided government that we identified is still the central challenge to the permanent peace talks in Islamabad. 21 episodes, one story, 40 days. And this morning, for the first time since February the 28th, the guns are mostly silent. What happens next is the most important question, because the ceasefire is not the peace. It is the pause before the peace attempt. The Islamabad talks on Friday will determine whether the 10-point Iranian framework and the American position can be bridged into something permanent. Those talks will involve Iran's nuclear program. Iran has not agreed to stop enrichment. Trump has said he would not accept Iran keeping enrichment capability. Iran's Supreme National Security Council says the ceasefire does not mean the end of the war. The fundamental issues that this conflict was started over, nuclear weapons, proxy forces, regional influence, are still unresolved. The next 2 weeks will either produce the beginning of a genuine settlement or the end of the ceasefire and a return to war. The Islamabad talks are the most important diplomatic event in the Middle East since the Oslo Accords of 1993. And unlike Oslo, which had years of preparation, these talks begin on Friday after 40 days of war, with both sides claiming victory and meaning different things by it. Geo Polity will be here for every day of those 2 weeks. We will cover the Islamabad talks. We will cover every development that affects the ceasefire's survival. We will tell you when oil prices begin to move at the pump in real terms. We will tell you what the nuclear question actually requires and whether either side can accept what the other needs. Because the story of the 2026 Iran war does not end with a ceasefire. It enters its next chapter. And you deserve to understand that chapter with the same clarity and connection you have brought to the 21 that came before it. If this series has given you something real, understanding, clarity, a map of a confusing and frightening world, please like this video right now. 21 episodes in, your engagement is the reason this channel exists. Subscribe and turn on every notification. The Islamabad talks are on Friday. Episode 22 is coming. You need to be here, share this video, today, right now, with everyone you know, because the ceasefire is the most searched story on Earth at this moment. And your network has people in it who understand what happened last night far less clearly than you do after 21 episodes of this series. Give them the context, give them the explanation, give them the map, and comment below. Tell us what you feel this morning. Relief, skepticism, cautious hope, something you cannot name. Tell us where in the world you are. Tell us what 40 days of this war cost you personally. And tell us whether you think the Islamabad talks will hold. We read everything, every word. 40 days, 21 episodes, and this morning, the guns are mostly quiet. This is Geo Polity. Stay informed, stay analytical, and we will see you in the next one.